Ancient cultures asked the same profound question we still ponder today. Where did we come from? Their answers form some of the most spectacular stories ever told. And by the end of this journey, you will see the very concept of creation in a completely new light. We will explore 30 different origin myths from every corner of the globe, tales of gods forming people from corn and giants whose bodies became the earth. Why did so many civilizations believe humanity was born from sorrow or violence? How could a bear and a cosmic egg both be our ancestors? These ancient narratives are far more than simple fables. They are the bedrock of entire societies, explaining everything from royal power to our relationship with nature. What does our own desire for a beginning story truly reveal about us? One of humanity's very first recorded answers to the question of our origins comes from the dusty plains of ancient Sumer. In the beginning, according to their tablets, there was only the primordial watery abyss, a vast and formless deep called Namu. From these waters, the heavens and the earth were born as a single mountain, with the sky god An at its peak and the earth goddess Kai at its base. Their union produced Enlil, the god of air, who would perform the first great act of creation. Enlil forcefully separated his parents, An and Kai, pulling the sky away from the earth to create the world we recognize, the air-filled space where life could begin. But the gods quickly grew tired of their own labors. They rebelled against the hard work of maintaining the universe, refusing to dig irrigation canals or tend the fields. A solution was needed, a new being to bear this burden. The god Enki, the god of wisdom and water, had the idea. Together with the mother goddess Ninhursag, he took clay from the watery abyss, mixed it, and shaped the very first human beings. Their purpose was not to rule or to be worshipped, but to serve. Humanity was created to be the laborers of the gods, to free the divine from toil so they could rest. This act established a fundamental hierarchy that echoed throughout Sumerian society, where humans served the gods and kings, as the gods' representatives, ruled over everyone else. This cosmic order, however, was born from incredible violence. Another version of the story tells of a great war among the gods. The primordial mother Tiamat, a dragon-like goddess of the salty sea, rose up against the younger deities. The champion of the young gods, Marduk, faced her in an epic battle. He rode forth in a storm chariot, loosed the winds as his weapons, and shot an arrow that split Tiamat in two. From her monstrous body, he fashioned the world. He stretched one half of her skin to form the sky, with her spittle becoming the clouds and her eyes becoming the sources of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. The other half of her body he used to create the earth. Humanity itself was then formed from the blood and bone of another slain god, Kingu, Tiamat's consort. So, according to this ancient belief, our world is literally built from the corpse of a slain goddess, and we humans carry within us the essence of a rebellious divine being. This myth provided a powerful justification for the social structure of Mesopotamia, where each person had a divinely ordained role, a place in a universe that was literally built from conflict and shaped for a purpose. Far from the war-torn cosmos of Mesopotamia, another ancient civilization envisioned a very different kind of beginning. In the sun-scorched theology of Heliopolis, one of Egypt's most influential creation centers, existence began not with a battle, but with a solitary, conscious act. Before time, there was only none, an infinite, dark, and motionless ocean of chaos. From these primordial waters, a single entity willed itself into being, the god Autumn, whose name means the complete one. Standing on the first land, a pyramidal mound known as the Benben stone that rose from Nun's depths, Autumn was utterly alone. His first act of creation was one of self-generated life. According to the oldest texts, he created the first divine pair through an act of masturbation, grasping his phallus to bring forth Shu and Tefnut. Other versions say he spat them out. However it happened, the result was the birth of fundamental forces: Shu, the god of air and light, and Tefnut, the goddess of moisture and world order. These two deities then completed the next phase of creation by giving birth to Geb, the earth god, and Nut, the sky goddess. In a story that beautifully inverts the Sumerian separation myth, the air god Shu, their father, is the one who lifts his daughter Nut, the sky, high above his son Geb, the earth. This act of separation created the sacred space where life could flourish, the air-filled world between the starry body of the sky and the solid body of the earth. But where did humanity fit into this divine family tree? The Egyptians believed we came from a moment of profound divine emotion. The myth tells that the sun god Ra, often merged with autumn, once shed tears. And from these tears, these sacred droplets of liquid that fell from the eye of the supreme deity, human beings were formed. The Egyptian word for people is remech, which sounds remarkably similar to their word for tears. This origin gave humanity a deeply poignant and dual nature. We were literally born from the sorrow of a god, making us divine in our essence, yet forever connected to a source of sadness. This narrative, centered on the Benben stone and the primordial mound, was not just a story. It was the blueprint for every Egyptian temple and pyramid, each one a symbolic recreation of that first island of order rising from the chaotic waters of Nun. While the Egyptians saw creation born from divine tears, the early Greeks envisioned a universe that began with a vast, yawning gap. Our next creation story opens not with a solitary god, but with the personification of a void, a being named Chaos. From this primordial emptiness emerged the foundational forces of the cosmos, the earth goddess Gaia, the deep abyss of Tartarus, and Eros, the powerful spirit of love and procreation whose presence made all future unions possible. This was a family tree of the world itself, a theogony, or birth of the gods, as recorded by the poet Hesiod. Gaia, without a partner, gave birth to the starry sky, Uranus, and then took him as her consort. Together they produced the mighty Titans, but Uranus was a cruel father, forcing their children back into the earth the moment they were born. In agony, Gaia conspired with her youngest son, the Titan Cronus, who ambushed his father and castrated him with a sickle, seizing power for himself. This violent act established a pattern of succession through betrayal, a cycle that would soon repeat itself. Cronus, fearing a prophecy that he too would be overthrown by his own child, devoured each of his offspring at birth. His wife Rhea, grief-stricken, managed to save her sixth child by tricking Cronus into swallowing a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes. That hidden child was Zeus, who was raised in secret until he was strong enough to challenge his father. He forced Cronus to disgorge his siblings, and together they waged a catastrophic 10-year war against the Titans, the Titanomachy. With the help of freed giants and the mighty thunderbolts forged for him, Zeus finally cast the Titans into the abyss of Tartarus, establishing the rule of the Olympian gods. But humanity's story begins with a different Titan, the clever Prometheus. According to the myth, he took clay from the earth and, mixing it with water, shaped the first men in the image of the gods. He then defied Zeus by stealing the sacred fire of the gods, hiding it in a hollow fennel stalk to give to his fragile creations. This gift was more than just warmth and light. It was the spark of knowledge, technology, and civilization itself. For this act of rebellion, Zeus devised a terrible and eternal punishment. He had Prometheus chained to a rock in the Caucasus Mountains, where every day a giant eagle would tear out his liver, only for it to grow back each night, condemning him to an endless cycle of agony. This profound myth of order violently emerging from primal chaos resonated deeply with early Greek philosophers. They looked at the natural world and saw this same cosmic struggle reflected everywhere, a constant tension between raw, untamed forces and the intellect that seeks to shape them. Yet another world was built from the body of a slain giant, but this one was carved in the frigid heart of a northern winter. In the Norse tradition, the universe began with a vast emptiness called Ginnungagap, a silent void where nothing existed. To its north lay Niflheim, a realm of primal cold, mist and ice. To its south was Muspelheim, a world of scorching fire. When the embers from Muspelheim drifted into the frigid air of Niflheim, the ice began to melt. From these dripping, life-giving drops, the first being was born, the frost giant Ymir. He was a colossal, chaotic figure, and as he slept, more giants sweat from his armpits and legs, spawning the race of Jotun. The melting ice also formed a colossal cow named Audumbla, whose rivers of milk nourished Ymir. As she licked the salty ice blocks for sustenance, she slowly uncovered another being, Beri, the first of the gods, who was trapped within the ice. This was a cosmos born from elemental opposites, fire and ice, whose clash generated both life and its inherent conflict. The stage was set for a world forged in violence. Beri's grandson was the one-eyed god Odin. Together with his brothers Vili and Ve, Odin saw the chaotic, growing threat of the frost giants led by Ymir. They confronted the primordial giant and slew him. The blood that gushed from Ymir's wounds was so immense it drowned nearly all the other frost giants, leaving only a single couple to survive and repopulate the race of giants. This was not just a killing, it was an act of cosmic craftsmanship. The brothers dragged Ymir's colossal corpse into the center of Ginnungagap and began to dismantle it, building our world from his remains. They fashioned the earth from his flesh, the vast oceans and lakes from his blood, and the towering mountains from his great bones. With great effort, they lifted his gigantic skull high above the earth to form the dome of the sky, and they stationed 4 dwarves at its corners to hold it aloft. These dwarves were named after the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. Finally, they snatched sparks and embers from the fires of Muspelheim and set them adrift in the sky to become the sun, the moon, and the stars. The world was now ordered, but it was still empty of its rightful inhabitants. Walking along the shore one day, Odin and his brothers found 2 trees, an ash and an elm, washed up by the tide. They saw potential in this driftwood, a raw material waiting for a spark. The 3 gods then set to work, imbuing the wooden forms with life and purpose. Odin gave them spirit and the breath of life. Vili gave them intelligence, motion, and the 5 senses. Ve gave them their outward forms, speech and hearing. The man was named Ask, meaning ash tree, and the woman Imbla, meaning elm tree. From them, all of humanity was descended. This entire narrative, from the slaughter of Ymir to the animation of the first humans, encapsulates the core Norse worldview. The cosmos was not born from peaceful contemplation or divine tears, but from a necessary, brutal struggle against primal chaos. Creation required a foundational sacrifice, a death to give life to order. This established a cycle where creation and destruction were forever linked, a belief that would ultimately point toward their own prophesied end, Ragnarok, when the world itself would be consumed by fire and water, only to be reborn once more from the silence. Deep within a swirling, chaotic egg slept a giant named Pangu. For 18,000 years he grew, curled in that cosmic womb of mist and shadow, until the day he finally awoke. Stretching his immense limbs, he shattered the shell, and the light, clear parts of the egg floated upward to become the heavens, while the heavy, dark parts sank to form the earth. But Pangu feared they would collapse back into each other, so he planted his feet on the earth and pushed the sky upward with his hands, holding them apart. And then he began to grow. Each day, Pangu grew 10 feet taller, pushing the sky another 10 feet further from the earth. For another 18,000 years, he performed this monumental task, a living pillar between the 2 realms, until the sky was impossibly high and the earth was immeasurably thick. When his work was finally done, the exhausted giant collapsed. His final breath became the wind and clouds. His voice, now silent, became the rolling thunder. His left eye transformed into the radiant sun, and his right eye became the gentle moon. His body and limbs stretched out to become the great mountains, his blood flowed out as the rivers, and his veins became the paths that crisscrossed the land. The sweat from his body fell as the nourishing rain, and the hairs on his skin sprouted into the forests and grasses. But what of humanity? The stories vary beautifully. Some say the fleas and parasites that lived on his body were carried by the wind and became the first people. Others tell that it was Pangu's tears, shed in his final moments, that flowed across the new world and transformed into human beings. This entire cosmic process reflects the core of Taoist thought, the dynamic balance of yin and yang. Pangu himself was the agent who separated these two forces, the dark earth and the light sky. His very body then became a universe where these opposites are forever intertwined, where the solid mountain, yang, stands beside the flowing river, yin. Humanity, in this view, is not the master of creation but a part of the giant's body, a small but intrinsic piece of a perfectly balanced whole. Yet another origin story suggests our entire universe is born from a single cosmic breath. The ancient hymns of the Rigveda, composed on the Indian subcontinent thousands of years ago, present a creation narrative of breathtaking scale and profound philosophical doubt. Here, the cosmos is not a one-time event but an endless, rhythmic cycle of creation, preservation, and dissolution, a process overseen by a divine trinity. Brahma is the creator who brings forth the universe from the divine essence. Vishnu is the preserver who sustains it throughout its vast lifespan, and Shiva is the destroyer who dissolves it back into its source, only for the cycle to begin again. This concept of cyclical time, of universes breathing in and out, challenges the very idea of a linear beginning. One of the most remarkable passages in the Rigveda, the Nasadiya Sukta, or the Hymn of Creation, leans directly into this mystery. It describes a time before time when there was neither existence nor non-existence, no air nor the sky beyond. What covered everything? Where was it? Who cared for it? The hymn asks if even the gods know how this came to be, for they too came after the world's creation. It famously concludes that perhaps the one who watches from the highest heaven knows, or perhaps even he does not. This is not a myth that provides a simple answer, but one that honors the question itself, framing creation as the ultimate enigma. Alongside this philosophical wonder exists a more tangible creation story, that of the cosmic giant Purusha. This primeval being, a thousand-headed and thousand-footed entity, was offered in a grand sacrifice by the gods themselves. From his dismembered body, the entire ordered world was formed. His mind became the moon, his eyes became the sun, his breath became the wind, and his head became the sky. His feet became the earth, and from his navel arose the middle atmosphere. But this was more than just a physical creation. Purusha's very body also gave rise to the foundation of human society. His mouth became the priestly class, the Brahmins. His arms became the warriors and rulers, the Kshatriyas. His thighs became the commoners, the Vaishyas, and his feet became the servants, the Shudras. This origin established a social and cosmic order where every person and every element of nature has a divine origin and a specific preordained place. Underlying all of this, from the cyclical universe to the sacrifice of Purusha, is the concept of Brahman. Brahman is the ultimate, unchanging reality, the singular, formless source from which all existence emanates and to which it all ultimately returns. It is the silent, eternal truth behind the dance of the gods and the turning of the ages. This vision offers a radically different perspective, one where our world is a temporary manifestation in an endless divine play, and where our own souls are sparks of that same ultimate reality, forever connected to the cosmic whole. Another world was sung into existence. Across the vast continent of Australia, Aboriginal cultures speak of the Dreamtime, a sacred era that is not a distant past but a continuous, living reality. This was the time when the ancestral beings, the creator spirits, first emerged from the featureless earth and the empty sky. They began their epic journeys, walking, crawling, and flying across the primordial landscape, and every action they performed shaped the world we know today. One of the most powerful of these beings is the rainbow serpent, a colossal spirit associated with water, the lifeblood of the arid land. As it moved across the flat, barren world, its massive body pushed up the ridges of mountains and carved deep gorges and riverbeds into the earth. Where it rested, it created permanent waterholes, vital sources of sustenance in a dry country. But the rainbow serpent was more than a landscape artist, it was a lawgiver. It established the first rituals and the social laws that would govern human behavior, teaching the people how to live in harmony with the land and with one another. The ancestral beings were not distant gods who then departed. At the end of their creative journeys, they grew weary and transformed themselves, sinking back into the very land they had shaped. A creator woman might lie down and become a particular mountain range. A group of ancestral men might turn into a cluster of distinctive rock formations. A journey of a kangaroo spirit might become a winding path of bush tucker plants. These places are not merely landmarks, they are sacred sites, the literal and spiritual bodies of the ancestors. This inseparable connection forms the foundation of Aboriginal identity, linking specific tribes and clans to specific places through timeless stories and responsibilities. How is this ancient creation kept alive? The Dreamtime is continually accessed and celebrated through ceremony, song, dance, and art. These are not simple retellings of old tales, they are powerful acts of participation. By performing the songs that describe the rainbow serpent's journey, the people reaffirm their connection to the water and the law. By painting the patterns of a honey ant ancestor, they honor the life it provides. This creates an unbroken thread stretching back to the very moment of creation, a spiritual contract between the people, the land, and the ancestors who are the land. It is a world view where every mountain, every river, and every person has a defined place in a story that is still being sung. The gods of the Mayan world were not satisfied with silence. Theirs is a story of trial and error, a divine struggle to create a being that could speak their names and offer them proper veneration. This epic is recorded in the Popol Vuh, the sacred book of the Kayich Maya, and it tells of a cosmos that began with a vast, empty sea and a sky devoid of life. The creator gods, including the feathered serpent deity Cuauhtémoc, were present in this watery calm, but they longed for beings who could acknowledge their glory. Their first attempt was the animals. They fashioned the creatures of the forest, the birds of the air, and the fish of the sea. But these beings could only squawk, howl, and hiss. They could not form words or lift their heads in prayer. The gods declared this a failure, condemning the animals to be eaten and resolved to try again. Their next creation was made from moist earth and mud. These mud people could speak, but their words were slurred and nonsensical. They were weak, their faces lopsided, and they crumbled apart when wet, dissolving back into the earth from which they came. This, too, was a profound disappointment. In a third and disastrous attempt, the gods crafted people from wood. These wooden mannequins looked human and they multiplied, but they had no hearts, no minds, and no memory of their makers. They walked aimlessly, without gratitude or understanding. The gods sent a great flood and a torrent of black resin from the sky to destroy them, while their own cooking pots and grinding stones rose up to attack them. The few survivors, it is said, became the monkeys that chatter in the trees, a permanent reminder of this flawed creation. This cycle of failure reveals a core truth for the Maya. Humanity had to be perfect to fulfill its sacred duty, and the substance used to form us was of the utmost importance. The stage for humanity's eventual creation was set by two legendary heroes, the divine twins Hunahpu and Xbalanque. Their story is an epic in itself. Their father and uncle, also great ball players, had been tricked and sacrificed by the cruel, decaying lords of the underworld, Xibalba. the twins, gifted and clever, avenged their family by descending into that terrifying realm. They faced impossible tests and deadly traps, using their wits to turn the Lord's own tricks against them. In a final, dramatic performance, they pretended to be wandering magicians, sacrificing each other and miraculously returning to life. Amazed, the Lords of Death demanded to be part of this magic. The twins then sacrificed the Lords, but this time did not bring them back, defeating the powers of death and clearing the way for a new, resilient humanity to be born. With the Lords of Xibalba vanquished, the path was clear. The gods gathered at a place called the Split Place, Bitter Water Place, and began the work that would finally succeed. This time, they used a sacred and sustaining substance, maize. The 4 first men were painstakingly formed from a dough of yellow and white maize, ground by the ancient grandmother goddess Exmucain. The gods themselves contributed the very essence of life, mixing the maize with water to form the flesh and using their own blood to give it strength. These 4 men, Jaguar Quitzy, Jaguar Knight, Not Right Now, and Dark Jaguar, were perfect. They possessed immense wisdom and insight, able to see everything in the world at once, from the farthest mountain to the smallest grain of sand. Seeing this perfection, the gods grew concerned. These beings were too much like the gods themselves, so they breathed a cloud over the men's eyes, limiting their vision to create the human experience we know, one of mystery and gradual discovery. Soon after, while the first men slept, the gods created 4 women to be their wives, and from these 4 couples arose the founding lineages of the Maya people. This origin established corn as more than just a food source. It was the literal substance of human life, a sacred gift that tied humanity directly to the gods and the earth. Every meal of maize was a spiritual act, a reaffirmation of that divine connection, and the profound responsibility to honor the creators who had worked so hard to bring them into being. For the Aztecs, creation was not a single event, but a terrifying cycle of cosmic trial and error. Theirs was a universe haunted by the ghosts of 4 previous worlds, 4 suns that had each been annihilated by catastrophic forces. The first age, the Sun of Earth, was inhabited by giants who were ultimately devoured by jaguars. The second, the Sun of Wind, ended with hurricanes that swept its people away, transforming them into monkeys. The third, the Sun of Rain of Fire, was consumed by a torrent of volcanic fire, and the fourth, the Sun of Water, perished in a great flood that turned its inhabitants into fish. Each epoch was a failed experiment, a world that could not achieve balance and was violently wiped clean. This relentless cycle of destruction and rebirth was the fundamental rhythm of existence, a belief etched into their very calendar stones and codices. The world we live in now is the 5th and final sun, the sun of movement, and its birth required the ultimate sacrifice. The myth tells of a great gathering of the gods at the sacred city of Teotihuacan in a time of darkness following the 4th sun's demise. The problem was simple yet dire. A new sun was needed to illuminate the world, but who would become it? 2 gods stepped forward. The first was Tecusistecatl, a proud and wealthy god who offered gold and precious gems. The second was Nanahuatzin, a humble, sickly god covered in boils, who had nothing to offer but his own faith and a few pus-covered reeds. A great pyre was built and lit, blazing for 4 days. When the time came for the first god to leap into the divine flames, Tecusistecatl faltered, his courage failing him 4 times in the face of the terrible heat. Then Nanahuatzin, without a moment of hesitation, closed his eyes and threw himself into the heart of the fire. Shamed by this act of pure devotion, Tecusistecatl finally jumped in after him. From the ashes, 2 suns rose in the sky, but this was too much light and heat for the world. One of the gods, furious, snatched a rabbit and threw it at the face of Tecusistecatl, dimming his brilliance and turning him into the moon. Yet this new sun, born from Nanahuatzin's sacrifice, hung motionless in the sky. It would not move. The gods realized that a final, gruesome payment was due. For the sun to journey across the sky, for life to continue, it needed the sacred energy contained in blood. So the gods themselves offered their own lives, allowing their hearts to be torn out in a mass act of divine sacrifice. Only with this offering of life did the sun finally lurch into motion, beginning its daily journey across the heavens. This foundational myth established the central, chilling principle of Aztec society. The sun was not a distant, self-sustaining star, but a dying god that required constant nourishment. Every sunrise was a victory that had to be earned, and every sunset brought the terrifying possibility that the sun might not rise again if it was not fed. Human sacrifice was not mere brutality, it was a sacred duty, a cosmic transaction to repay the debt owed to the gods and to fuel the very machinery of the universe. The blood of warriors and captives was the precious water and sunlight that kept the fifth sun alive, staving off the inevitable collapse into a final, eternal darkness. This worldview created a society living on a knife's edge, where war was a religious necessity to capture sacrificial victims, and the calendar was a countdown to a potential apocalypse that their own devotion could only hope to postpone. On the other side of the world, a different kind of creation unfolded from a bridge floating between two realms. In the Japanese Shinto tradition, the Kojiki, or records of ancient matters, tells of a time when heaven and earth were first parted from a primordial, oily chaos. The first deities summoned two divine beings into existence, the male Izanagi and the female Izanami, and gave them a sacred task to give form to the world below. Standing on the floating bridge of heaven, they dipped a magnificent jeweled spear, the Aim no Nuboko, into the briny ocean beneath. When they lifted the spear, droplets of salt water fell from its tip, coagulating in the sea to form the very first island, Onagoro, the self-forming land. This was not a violent act of dismemberment, but a gentle, almost artistic gesture that pulled solidity from liquid. The two deities then descended from the bridge to their new island home. They decided to marry and build the world together. To perform the marriage rite, they built a great pillar around which they would walk in opposite directions. When they met on the other side, Izanami, the female spirit, spoke first, saying, "What a fine young man." They united, but their first children were malformed, including a leech child. The elder gods informed them that their union was improper because the woman had spoken first. They repeated the ritual, and this time Izanagi spoke first when they met, saying, "What a fine young woman." From this correct union, they gave birth to the 8 main islands of Japan and a multitude of kami, the spirits of the natural world, from the mountains and the rivers to the wind and the grain. But this act of creation carried a terrible cost. While giving birth to the fire god Kagetsuchi, Izanami was horrifically burned and descended into the land of the dead, a foul and polluted realm called Yomi. A grief-stricken Izanagi could not accept her loss. He journeyed into the darkness of Yomi to retrieve her. He found her in the shadows and begged her to return, but she told him he was too late, for she had already eaten the food of the underworld and could not leave. She pleaded with him not to look at her, but Izanagi, impatient, lit a torch. In its flickering light, he saw her corpse in a state of advanced decay, swarming with maggots and thunder gods. Horrified, he fled. Humiliated and enraged, Izanami sent hideous hags and an army of warriors to chase him. Izanagi barely escaped, blocking the entrance to Yomi with a massive boulder, forever separating the worlds of the living and the dead. Izanami screamed from the other side, promising to strangle 1,000 of his people every day. He defiantly replied that he would then cause 1,500 to be born every day, establishing the eternal cycle of life and death. Ritually polluted by his contact with the dead, Izanagi went to a river to purify himself. As he washed his body, each article he removed or part he cleansed gave birth to new deities. The most important of these were born from his face, the sun goddess Amaterasu from his left eye, the moon god Tsukuyomi from his right eye, and the storm god Susanoo from his nose. Amaterasu, radiant and benevolent, was given rule over the high celestial plane, and her grandson, Ninigi, was later sent down to the Japanese islands to rule. It was Ninigi's own great-grandson, Jimmu, who became the first legendary emperor of Japan in the 7th century before the Common Era. This entire narrative provided a divine mandate for the Japanese imperial line, directly linking the earthly ruler to the very gods who formed the islands themselves, and established a worldview where every element of nature, from a grand waterfall to a simple stone, is imbued with its own sacred spirit or kami. A stark division between light and darkness lies at the heart of ancient Persian belief. In the Zoroastrian vision, the universe began not with a single creator, but with two primordial spirits existing from eternity. One was Ahura Mazda, the Lord of Wisdom, who represented boundless light, truth, and order. The other was his adversary, Angra Mainyu, the destructive spirit, who was made of absolute darkness, deceit, and chaos. Ahura Mazda, in his omniscience, knew that conflict with this evil twin was inevitable, so he fashioned a perfect, radiant world, a creation without flaw, age, or suffering. It was a realm of ideal forms where the sky was a crystal shell, the earth was flat and without mountains, and the first human, the majestic Gaimard, shone with divine light. But this perfection was not to last. Angra Mainyu, seething with envy and malice, looked upon this flawless creation and launched a brutal invasion. He did not create anything new, he could only corrupt and defile what Ahura Mazda had made. He pierced the crystal sky, bringing in death and decay. He scarred the flat earth, raising mountains and creating deserts, and he unleashed a horde of demons to attack the luminous Gaimard. Though Gaimard fought valiantly, he was ultimately struck down by the evil spirit. Yet, in a final act of creation, as he died, his seed fell to the purified earth. After 40 years from that seed, a rhubarb plant grew, and from that plant emerged the first human couple, Mashia and Mashiana. They were not born into the perfect world Gaimard had known, but into a world already wounded by evil, a world where they would have to choose between the path of truth and the path of the lie. This origin story establishes a cosmic war that is the very fabric of existence. Every human thought, word, and deed becomes a battle in this struggle. Choosing honesty, charity, and cultivation supports Ahura Mazda's forces of light. Choosing deceit, cruelty, and destruction aids Angra Mainyu's legions of darkness. This is not a distant spiritual conflict, it is lived daily in our most basic moral choices. The entire arc of history, in this view, is a 12,000-year war between these two fundamental powers. But this struggle has a definitive and hopeful end. Zoroastrian prophecy speaks of a final renovation, a moment when a savior figure will appear, the dead will be resurrected, and a river of molten metal will flow across the earth. For the righteous, this river will feel like warm milk, a final purification. For the wicked, it will be a searing judgment. In the end, Angra Mainyu and all his demonic forces will be utterly defeated and cast back into the eternal darkness, and the world will be restored to its original, perfect state, forever free from death and suffering. This powerful dualistic framework, with its clear battle between good and evil, a final judgment, and a heavenly paradise, profoundly shaped the development of later Abrahamic faiths. The concepts of a single benevolent God, a devil-like antagonist, a soul facing judgment after death, and a final victory of good over evil can all trace significant roots back to these ancient Persian plains, showing how one culture's answer to the problem of suffering would echo for millennia. High in the thin air of the Andes, a solitary figure walked out from the depths of Lake Titicaca. This was Viracocha, the great creator god, emerging from the sacred waters onto the barren landscape of the ancient world. His first act was to bring light to the darkness, commanding the sun, the moon, and the stars to rise into the sky and begin their celestial journeys. With the world now illuminated, he set about his work, sculpting the first beings from the very earth itself. These were not humans as we know them, but a race of giants, colossal figures meant to inhabit the land. Yet these giants failed him. They were disobedient and foolish, neglecting their duties to the Creator. Displeased, Viracocha unleashed a great flood that swept across the earth, wiping the giants from existence and leaving the world empty once more. But Viracocha was not finished. He began again, this time with a more durable material. He shaped new people from stone, carving them with care and infusing them with life. Yet he did not leave them to wander the surface. Instead, he sent these stone-born humans underground, placing them deep within the earth to wait within sacred origin points known as pakarinas. These were not just any holes in the ground, they were portals of life, specific caves, springs, and mountain peaks scattered throughout the Andes. When the time was right, these first people emerged from these pakarinas, claiming the land around them as their own ancestral home, thus establishing the deep, unbreakable bond between a community and its place of origin. To bring order to this newly populated world, Viracocha performed one final act of creation. He fashioned two divine beings from the island of the sun in Lake Titicaca, the man Manco Capac and the woman Mama Oclo. He gave them a sacred mission to travel forth and find the perfect place to establish a great civilization. To guide them, he gave Manco Capac a golden staff and instructed him to plunge it into the earth as they journeyed. Where the staff sank completely into the soil with a single thrust, that would be the chosen spot. After a long and arduous trek, they arrived in a high mountain valley. There, the golden staff disappeared effortlessly into the ground. On that very spot, they founded the city of Cusco, the navel of the world. Manco Capac taught the men he found how to farm and build, while Mama Oclo taught the women how to weave and manage a household. This myth was far more than a story for the Inca. It was a divine mandate for empire. It explained why the Inca, the children of the sun sent by Viracocha, held the right to rule over all other Andean peoples. Every community might have emerged from their own local pacarina, but the Inca rulers alone could trace their lineage directly back to the creator God himself, justifying their relentless expansion and unifying a vast mountainous realm under a single celestial authority. Chaos and noise were the catalysts for our own creation in the eyes of the Babylonians. Their great epic, the Enuma Elish, opens not with a void but with a mingling of two primordial waters. Apsu, the god of fresh, sweet water, and Tiamat, the goddess of the salty, chaotic sea, existed together in a silent, watery union. From their waters, the first generations of younger gods were born. But these new deities were vibrant and loud, filling the formless deep with their energy and clamor. The constant noise and movement became unbearable for Apsu, who represented the quiet, static nature of the original cosmos. He could not rest. He went to Tiamat and proposed a terrible solution. Let us destroy our own children so we may have silence again. Tiamat, the mother of all, was horrified by this suggestion. She raged against Apsu, asking how they could possibly bring ruin upon their own offspring. But Apsu was determined. The younger gods soon learned of his murderous plot, and they were seized with terror. It was the clever god E, the god of wisdom and magic, who took action. He cast a powerful spell of sleep upon Apsu, and while the primordial father lay unconscious, E killed him. He then built his own splendid temple upon Apsu's vast, quiet body, establishing a new order from the corpse of the old. In this temple, E and his consort Damkina then gave birth to the most magnificent of the gods, Marduk, a deity of storms and kingship endowed with immense power from the moment of his birth. But this act of defense sparked an even greater conflict. Tiamat, who had once defended her children, was now consumed by a different kind of fury, a vengeful wrath over the death of her husband. She created a monstrous new army, birthing a host of ferocious creatures, serpents with sharp fangs, whose bodies were filled with venom instead of blood, and dragons cloaked in a terrifying radiance. To lead this terrifying horde, she appointed her new consort, the god Kingu, and she gave him the ultimate authority, the Tablet of Destinies, which held the power to control the fates of all the gods. The younger gods were now facing annihilation. They needed a champion who could stand against Tiamat and her legions. One by one, the gods tried to face her, but the mere sight of Tiamat and her roaring monsters filled them with dread, and they turned back. Finally, they turned to the mighty Marduk. He agreed to be their defender, but on one condition: if he succeeded, he must be granted supreme and unchallenged kingship over all the gods. Desperate, they agreed. They built him a magnificent throne, acclaimed him as king, and gave him the very weapons he would need for the coming battle. Marduk rode out to meet Tiamat in a divine storm chariot, clad in terrifying armor, with a net held by the four winds to ensnare her. He challenged the primordial mother to single combat. As Tiamat opened her colossal jaws to consume him, Marduk drove the evil winds he had mustered into her mouth, inflating her body so she could not close it. He then shot a single arrow that tore through her swollen belly, piercing her heart and splitting her in two. The great dragon of the salt sea was dead. With her monstrous army now leaderless, Marduk captured Kingu and took from him the Tablet of Destinies, securing his own sovereign power. Then, in an act of supreme craftsmanship, he began to build our world. He took the upper half of Tiamat's gargantuan body and stretched it wide, pegging it in place to form the dome of the heavens, with her tail curling into the Milky Way. From her lower half, he created the earth. Her weeping eyes became the sources of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, and her breasts were fashioned into the great mountains. He set the moon and stars in the sky to mark the days, months, and years. The world was now ordered, but it was empty of its intended inhabitants. Marduk then made a final pronouncement. He declared that a new being should be created to serve the gods, to free them from all menial labor. He turned to the captured Kingu, the general who had led Tiamat's army. He charged Kingu with rebellion and executed him. From the blood of this slain god mixed with earth, and the other gods fashioned the first human beings. Our purpose was defined at the very moment of our creation. We were made to be the servants of the divine, to bear the burden of work so the gods could live at ease. This entire epic was far more than a simple story for the Babylonians. It was a sacred drama recited during the Grand Akitu, or New Year festival. This annual performance was a cosmic necessity. It reaffirmed Marduk's kingship over the gods, which in turn legitimized the king's rule on earth as Marduk's representative. It explained and justified the rigid social hierarchy, where priests, nobles, and commoners all had their divinely appointed place, just as humanity itself had its place in serving the gods. The universe itself was born from a necessary, violent victory over primordial chaos, and every human life was a continuation of that foundational service, a single thread in a cosmic order written in divine blood. But in the warm, tropical climate of West Africa, a creator god was sent on a mission with a most unusual toolkit. The Yoruba people tell of a supreme deity, Olodumare, who resides in the heavens and desired to create the solid earth below. For this monumental task, he chose the god Obatala, a being of purity and creativity. Olodumare gave Obatala a long chain, a simple snail shell filled with loose earth, a single palm nut, and a 5-toed chicken. Obatala then began his slow, careful descent from the sky, climbing down the chain until he hung just above the vast, endless expanse of the primordial waters. Following Olodumare's instructions, he poured the contents of the snail shell onto the water's surface. Then he set down the 5-toed chicken, which immediately began to scratch and scatter the earth, spreading it in all directions until it formed the first stretches of dry land. Once the land was stable, Obatala climbed down and named the place If, the sacred city of origin. He planted the palm nut, which swiftly grew into a grove of trees, and he began his next great work, fashioning the first human beings from the wet clay of the new earth. He sculpted each form with care, and Olodumare would then breathe life into them. But the story takes a deeply human turn. As Obatala worked, he grew thirsty from the heat and his long labors. He discovered that the palm trees he had planted could yield a sweet, fermenting wine. He began to drink, and soon he became intoxicated. in his drunken state, his hands lost their steadiness. He continued to mold the clay figures, but now some of the forms were misshapen, some were blind, and others were unable to walk. When he sobered up and saw what he had done, Obatala was filled with profound remorse. He swore never to drink palm wine again and dedicated himself to protecting all those he had created in his impaired state. Olajumer, in his wisdom, saw Obatala's sincere regret and made him the divine protector, the Orisha, of all people with disabilities. This myth carries a powerful and compassionate message about the nature of humanity. It does not present physical difference as a punishment or a flaw, but as a sacred part of the creation story itself, worthy of divine guardianship. It teaches that every human life, regardless of its form, is shaped by the hands of a god and animated by the breath of the Supreme Being, making all people intrinsically valuable and connected to the divine. In the deep, silent darkness, a family was trapped in an embrace of overwhelming love. This is the Maori story of creation, a tale not of cosmic battles or slain giants, but of a necessary separation. The Sky Father, Rangi, and the Earth Mother, Papa, lay locked together in a tight, loving union. Their children, the gods of the forests, the sea, the winds, and war, were forced to live in the cramped, perpetual twilight between their parents' bodies. They could not stretch their limbs, they could not see, and they longed for space and light to grow. For untold ages, the gods debated what to do. Should they kill their parents to secure their own freedom? The fierce god of war, too, argued for this violent solution, but others could not bear the thought of harming Rangi and Papa. It was Tain, the god of forests and of all living things, who proposed a different path. He would not strike or cut, he would push. Tain positioned himself between his mother and father. He lay on his back upon Papa, the earth, and planted his powerful feet against his father, Rangi, the sky. With a slow, monumental effort that strained every muscle, he began to push. His legs, as strong as the mightiest tree trunks, straightened. He pushed and pushed, groaning with the strain, until a sliver of light appeared. He pushed further, and with a great shuddering sigh, Rangi was forced upward, separated from his beloved Papa at last. Light flooded the world for the first time. The children of Rangi and Papa were finally free, able to move into the vast space that Tain had created. But this liberation was born from sorrow. Rangi, separated from his wife, wept endlessly, and his tears fell to the earth as rain. Papa, longing for her husband, sighed deeply, and her breath rose from the forests and mountains as mist. To this day, their love for one another is visible in the mist that drifts up from the earth to meet the sky, a constant, gentle reminder of their original union. This myth provides a deeply emotional explanation for the natural world. The rain is not merely weather, it is the Sky Father's grief. The mist is not just vapor, it is the Earth Mother's longing. Within the Maori worldview, this story establishes that the entire universe is a family. The forests are the children of Tain, the ocean is the child of Tangaroa, and every element of nature is a sibling, connected by a shared origin and a shared story of emergence from darkness into light. It is a world view built not on domination but on respect, responsibility, and the poignant understanding that life itself exists in the space between love and loss. Far above the primordial ocean, a world existed in the crowded, arched dome of the sky vault. This was the home of all the animals, pressed together in a realm that was far too small for them. They longed for more space, a place to run and roam, but all they could see below was an endless expanse of water. The situation grew desperate, and the animals held a great council to decide what could be done. They needed land, and the only way to get it was for someone to dive deep into the waters below and bring some up. One by one, the best divers tried and failed. The loon dove down but could not reach the bottom. The grebe tried next, returning exhausted and empty-handed. It seemed hopeless until a small, unassuming creature, the water beetle, volunteered. It dove down into the dark, deep water, disappearing for so long that the others feared it was lost, but it finally surfaced, exhausted, with a tiny bit of soft mud clutched in its legs. As the animals watched, this mud was placed on the water, and it began to magically expand, growing and spreading in all directions until it formed the first island of solid earth. The land was soft and muddy, so the great buzzard was sent to survey it. He flew far and wide over the new world, and where his powerful wings beat down, they carved immense valleys. Where he pulled his wings up, the earth rose into great mountains. He grew weary over what would become the Cherokee homeland, and as he tired, his wingtips began to drag, creating the rugged, beautiful topography of that specific region. Only after the land was fully formed and all the plants and animals were placed upon it did the creators make the first people. A brother and a sister were created, and the brother struck the sister with a fish, commanding her to multiply. Within 7 days, she gave birth to a child, and so the human race began. But there was one final adjustment to be made. The sun was originally placed too close to the earth, making the world unbearably hot. The clever solution was to raise the sun, not just once but 7 times, each move lifting it higher until it reached the perfect height in the sky, bringing balance to the world. This entire process establishes a profound truth for the Cherokee people. Humanity was the last act of creation, not its pinnacle. We arrived after the land was shaped and the animals were established, making us the younger siblings in a world that was already complete. Our existence is intrinsically tied to the actions of the water beetle and the buzzard, reminding us that we are part of a vast, interconnected community of life, with a deep responsibility to the land that was so carefully crafted for us. The creator god Amma began with a single thought in the silent void. In the Dogon tradition of Mali, the universe started as a tiny, vibrating grain of matter, a seed of existence known as the Po. From this infinitesimal point, Amma willed the cosmos into being, and his first act of physical creation was to shape the earth. But this was no inanimate sphere, it was a living, female body, lying flat with her legs and arms outstretched. A great anthill represented her clitoris, and a termite mound symbolized her penis, for this primordial earth was androgynous, a being of dual nature. Amma, desiring to bring forth life, fertilized this earthly body with the rain, a divine and gentle act of union, yet this first union was disrupted. The earth's male aspect, the termite mound, rose up to meet Amma prematurely, a rebellion that introduced imperfection and chaos into the world from the very beginning. This flawed act produced a single, incomplete creature, the jackal, who would forever represent the forces of disorder and rebellion. Determined to correct this imbalance, Amma began again. This time he successfully united with the earth, and from this perfect union he brought forth the Namo. These were divine twins, amphibious beings who were both male and female, masters of water and the life-giving force. They were perfect, shining beings of immense knowledge, and they existed in a state of pure harmony. But the universe, once scarred by the jackal's creation, seemed destined for conflict. One of the twin pairs of the Namo, embodying the principle of rebellion just as the jackal had, challenged Amma's order. This divine being sought to create a separate world, an act of supreme arrogance that shattered the cosmic balance. As punishment for this transgression, Amma sacrificed the rebellious Namo, dismembering his body and scattering the pieces across the world. This act was necessary to purify the universe, but it cast a shadow over all of creation. Yet this was not the end. In his mercy, Amma resurrected the Namo, restoring him to life and making him the guardian of the spiritual world. The Namo, now whole again, were placed in an ark that descended from the heavens to the earth. This vessel, accompanied by the sound of a spinning whirlwind and a great flash of light, brought the essence of civilization to humanity. The resurrected Namo became the ancestors of the Dogon people, and they stepped forth from the ark to teach humanity everything they would need to thrive. They revealed the secrets of agriculture, showing how to cultivate grain. They gifted language and the principles of social order. They instructed people in the use of tools and the sacred rituals that would connect them to the divine. Humanity's entire cultural foundation was a direct inheritance from these aquatic, celestial teachers. What makes this myth truly astonishing is the profound astronomical knowledge woven seamlessly into its fabric. The Dogon priests have long spoken of a tiny, incredibly dense and heavy star that orbits the brilliant Sirius, the brightest star in our sky. They called this invisible companion star Potolo, and they knew it took 50 years to complete a single orbit. For centuries, this was considered mere legend. Then, in the 19th century, Western astronomers discovered that Sirius did indeed have a companion, a white dwarf star we call Sirius B. This star is invisible to the naked eye and was only confirmed with powerful telescopes. It is unimaginably dense, and its orbital period is almost exactly 50 years. The Dogon, without any apparent technological means, had preserved this precise celestial knowledge for generations, embedded within their story of the Nommo and the cosmic arc. This suggests their creation myth is far more than a story. It is a complex cosmological map, a testament to an ancient and sophisticated understanding of the universe that still leaves modern observers in awe. Her fingers, severed one by one, fell into the frigid ocean and transformed into seals, walruses, and whales. This is the origin of Sedna, the one-fingered goddess of the sea, whose wrath and sorrow dictate the very survival of the Inuit people. The story begins with a beautiful young woman, known by many names, who lived with her father. She rejected all her human suitors, and in some versions she even married a dog, bringing shame upon her family. In despair, her father took her out to sea in his boat, promising a new life. But when a storm arose, he was gripped by a terrible fear. Believing his daughter's strange nature had angered the spirits, he made a horrific choice to save himself. He threw her overboard into the churning, icy water. As she desperately clung to the side of the boat, pleading for her life, her father took his knife and hacked at her fingers. She sank into the abyss, her mutilated hand sealing her fate, but she did not die. She descended to the bottom of the sea, and her immense suffering transformed her into a powerful, immortal spirit. Her severed fingers, swimming away as the first sea mammals, became the foundation of the Inuit world, the very source of food, clothing, and tools. Sedna rules this submarine realm from a dark, cold lodge, her hair perpetually tangled and filthy. She is a figure of profound contradiction, both the mother who provides life and the vengeful spirit who can withhold it. When humans break taboos or show disrespect, Sedna's hair becomes matted with the filth of their sins. This tangling prevents the sea mammals from being released to the hunters, causing famine across the land. In times of crisis, the community turns to its shaman. The Angakok must undertake a perilous spiritual journey, descending through treacherous layers of the spirit world to reach Sedna's home. There, the shaman must calm the furious goddess, soothing her by combing the tangles from her long, neglected hair. Only through this act of intimate care and apology can the shaman appease Sedna, convincing her to release the animals so the people may eat and live for another season. This myth explains not only the origin of sea life, but also the origin of the Inuit peoples themselves. Another foundational story tells of the first man, who arrived on the shores of this new world and took a woman from the sea as his wife. Some say she was a sea goddess, a being from the same watery realm as Sedna. Their union produced children, who in turn became the ancestors of the various Inuit groups spreading across the Arctic. This dual origin cements an unbreakable bond. Humanity is literally born from the sea, and its survival is entirely dependent on the mercy of its powerful, wounded guardian. This is not a myth of dominion, but one of delicate, sacred reciprocity. Every successful hunt is a gift from Sedna, and every part of the animal must be used with gratitude. Wasting a kill or breaking hunting rituals is not just bad practice, it is a direct insult to the goddess, one that tangles her hair and risks the lives of the entire community. The story of Sedna, born from a father's betrayal, instills a powerful environmental and social ethic, a constant reminder that human life exists in a fragile balance with a nature that is both bountiful and brutally unforgiving. From a single golden egg floating in the endless void, the supreme god Rod thought the universe into being. Slavic tradition tells us this was not a violent act but a conscious unfolding, a divine will that separated light from darkness simply by decree. Rod, whose name means kin or origin, was the embodiment of generative power itself, the source of all that would follow. His thoughts became reality, weaving the fabric of the cosmos. From this primordial act of intellect, he then brought forth the beautiful goddess Loda, the embodiment of love, harmony, and beauty. Loda, in turn, gave birth to a pantheon of deities, each one representing a fundamental force of the world her creator had envisioned. There was Perun, the god of thunder and lightning, Dajbog the sun god, and Veles the chthonic god of the earth, cattle, and the underworld. This was not a random assembly of gods, but the careful establishment of a cosmic order, a family of divine powers that governed every aspect of existence from the harvest to the changing seasons. To watch over this newly ordered universe, Rod appointed the three-headed god Triglav, whose name means three heads. This formidable deity did not rule the three realms of heaven, earth, and the underworld, but rather served as their divine witness and guardian. His three heads allowed him to simultaneously see into Prav, the world of the gods and divine law, Yav, our tangible earthly world, and Nav, the spirit world of the ancestors and the underworld. Nothing in creation escaped his triune gaze, ensuring a balance was maintained across all layers of reality. With the cosmos now structured and watched over, it was time for humanity to take its place. The creation of the first humans explains the inherent inequalities of mortal life. According to the myth, the gods fashioned people from different materials, and this substance determined their destiny. Some were molded from gold, and these became the rulers and princes. Others were formed from silver, becoming the wealthy merchants and skilled artisans. The majority were made from simple, common wood, and these were the peasants and laborers who formed the backbone of society. Finally, some were created from dirt or iron, destined for a life of hardship and struggle. This origin did not imply that those made of wood or iron were less valued by the gods, but rather that each person had a specific role to play in the grand design Rod had set in motion, a place in the sacred order of things. This intricate pagan worldview, however, faced an immense challenge with the arrival of Christianity. As the new faith spread across Eastern Europe, the old gods were systematically demonized or transformed. The mighty Perun was sometimes conflated with the prophet Elijah, who rode his chariot of fire across the heavens. Veles, god of the underworld, was reduced to a simple devil or a mischievous forest spirit. Yet the essence of these ancient beliefs proved incredibly resilient. They did not disappear, they simply went underground, surviving for centuries in folk embroidery patterns, in the rituals surrounding births and marriages, and most powerfully in the fairy tales told to children. The figure of Baba Yaga, the fearsome witch of the forest who lives in a hut on chicken legs, is a direct descendant of an ancient Slavic goddess of death and regeneration. Her ambiguous nature, both threatening and helpful, echoes the complex spirits of the old world. The heroic journeys through three kingdoms, often to the underworld and back, reflect the ancient understanding of the three realms watched over by Triglav. So, while the names of Rod and Triglav were largely forgotten, the cosmic structure they represented and the stories they inspired never truly died, living on in the very bones of the culture, waiting to be rediscovered. Before time itself had a name, there was only the endless, quiet sea. Then, a single note broke the silence, the Oran Moor, the great song that vibrated across the featureless waters. This was not a song sung by any god, but the first sound of existence itself, a primal melody that wove consciousness and form from the void. Where its notes fell, the world began to take shape, and from the sea rose the goddess Danu, whose very body became the land of Ireland, its rolling green hills and deep, fertile valleys. She was the Earth Mother, and from her descended the Tuatha De Danann, the people of the goddess Danu. They were a race of divine beings, masters of magic, art, and science, who arrived in a mist that obscured the sun for 3 days. They carried with them 4 legendary treasures: the spear that never missed, the sword that could not be defeated, the cauldron that was never empty, and the stone that would cry out under the rightful king. They ruled Ireland for ages, but they were not the first or the last inhabitants. Another group arrived from across the sea, a race of humans known as the Milesians. After a great battle where magic was pitted against mortal determination, the Milesians prevailed. The defeated Tuatha De Danann did not perish. Instead, they used their profound magic to withdraw from the surface world, retreating into the hollow hills and ancient burial mounds. There they became the Owls She, the people of the mounds, who we now call the fairy folk. They exist just beside us, in a parallel world separated by the thinnest of veils, a shimmering curtain between reality and enchantment that grows transparent during festivals like Samhain. Yet another, more haunting wave of settlers arrived long before, emerging not from ships but from the deep, dark caves of the underworld. They were the people of Partholon, and they brought with them a new and permanent knowledge, the concept of death. With their arrival, mortality entered the world, and the first grave was dug in the Irish soil. This layered origin, with its successive invasions and retreats, explains the Celtic sense of a world saturated with spirit. Every grove of trees, every spring, and every hill could be a doorway. This is why the oral tradition of the bards and poets was so sacred. Their words were not just entertainment, but a powerful technology for remembering the old ways and maintaining the delicate balance between our world and the other. The poetry they recited was an echo of that first creative sound, a human attempt to sing back to the universe that made them. Even the gods grew tired of their own work. In the ancient Akkadian epic of Atrahasis, the world began not with a cosmic battle, but with a divine labor strike. The lesser gods, known as the Igigi, were tasked with the backbreaking work of digging the Tigris and Euphrates riverbeds. After 40 long years of this relentless toil, they finally snapped. They set their tools ablaze and marched in protest on the great gods, surrounding the main temple like an angry mob. The council of elder gods was thrown into panic. How could the cosmic order be maintained if the workers refused to work? The clever god Enki, ever the problem solver, proposed a radical solution. He suggested they create a new being, a mortal creature, to take over the burdensome labor. The mother goddess Mami then mixed clay with the flesh and blood of a slain rebel god, a ringleader named Illa, who was chosen by lot for this grim purpose. This divine ingredient was the key. It gave the new creatures, the first humans, the intelligence and life force to perform complex tasks, but it also carried a heavy price. Because they were made from the substance of a killed deity, mortality was woven into their very essence from the start. Humanity was born to serve and to die. This arrangement worked for a time, but the human population grew and their noise became an unbearable din to the chief god, Enlil. He saw humanity not as a blessing but as a nuisance. First, he sent a plague, then a famine, and finally a devastating drought to wipe them out. Each time, the compassionate Enki secretly intervened, instructing the wise priest Atrahasis on how to pray and make offerings to appease the specific god Enlil had enlisted, thereby saving his people. Enraged by these continued survivals, Enlil convinced the divine council to take the most extreme measure, a great flood that would obliterate all of humanity. The gods all swore a binding oath not to warn any human. But Enki, loyal to his creations, found a clever loophole. He did not speak to Atrahasis directly. Instead, he went to the reed wall of the man's hut and spoke to the wall itself, detailing the god's plan and instructing the wise man to build a boat, load it with his family and animals, and thus survive the coming deluge. Atrahasis obeyed, and when the flood came, it was so terrible that even the gods themselves were horrified, weeping at the destruction they had unleashed. When the waters finally receded and Atrahasis made a sacrifice, the starving gods who had been deprived of human offerings swarmed the smoke like flies. They realized their mistake, understanding that they needed humanity as much as humanity needed them. To prevent future overpopulation, the gods instituted new measures, creating categories of women who would not bear children and introducing infant mortality. This powerful myth presents a universe of stark truths. Human life is precious consciousness born from divine rebellion, yet it is defined by toil, suffering, and an inevitable end. Our relationship with the gods is not one of pure benevolence, but a tense and often fraught partnership, a necessary bargain struck between heaven and earth to maintain a fragile cosmic balance. The vast ocean was not just a home for the Polynesians, it was the very substance of creation itself. Their myths speak of a universe born from the dynamic tension between two fundamental states, Po and Ao. Po was the deep, generative night, a realm of profound potential and the unknown. Ao was the bright world of light, the manifested day where life takes form. Creation was not a single event, but a constant, rhythmic process of emerging from the dark, fertile waters of Po into the structured reality of Ao. This journey from potential to being is charted with breathtaking precision in the Hawaiian Kumulipo, a creation chant that unfolds over 16 distinct periods. It begins not with gods or giants, but in the absolute blackness of the deep ocean, where the very first living creature is the coral polyp, the foundation of the reef. From this simple, anchored life, the chant describes a meticulous evolution, a gradual unfolding of complexity. The limpet and the sea urchin follow, then the fish of the sea, the birds of the air, and finally the creatures of the land. Humanity appears in the final phases not as a separate, special creation, but as the culmination of this deep, organic lineage. We are the relatives of the coral and the fish, part of a single, interconnected family tree that grew from the sea. A different, yet equally profound, vision comes from the Maori of New Zealand. Here, in the eternal Po, existed Io, the supreme being, the ultimate source of all consciousness. Through his divine will and his breath, Io summoned light into the void, separating the Sky Father, Rangi, from the Earth Mother, Papa. This act was one of pure intellect, a conscious thought bringing form from formlessness. From the union of Rangi and Papa came the gods, and from the gods, humanity. This narrative, like the Hawaiian one, is a story of emergence, but it emphasizes a conscious, guiding intelligence behind the transition from the potential of Po to the reality of Ao. These are not just beautiful stories, they are sophisticated cosmological models born from a culture of master navigators. When the chant speaks of emerging from the deep, dark Po, it directly mirrors the experience of a long-distance voyager. For weeks, a canoe would sail across a seemingly endless dark ocean, a literal Po. The first sight of land, a green speck on the horizon, was the ultimate arrival into Ao, the world of light and life. The creation of the world was, in essence, a successful navigation. The chants themselves were navigational tools, encoding generations of observational science about ocean currents, star paths, and the habits of wildlife that signaled nearby land. So, in the Polynesian worldview, to understand creation is to understand how to navigate, and to navigate successfully is to reenact the very process that brought the world and humanity into being. Laughter and tears were the primordial elements of Armenian creation. The supreme god Aramazed, the father of all, did not shape the world through battle or will alone, but through the raw, uncontrollable expressions of his own divine spirit. When he laughed, the sound echoed through the void, crystallizing into the brilliant, vaulted dome of the sky and the radiant, life-giving sun. When he wept, his sorrow was not wasted, his tears falling in a great deluge that pooled into the vast seas and carved the riverbeds that would nourish the land. This emotional origin gave the Armenian cosmos a deeply human quality, a universe born from the very feelings that define our own existence. From this foundation, Aramazed then brought forth the other deities who would share in the governance of the world. He created his daughter, the luminous Anahit, and bestowed upon her the domains of fertility, wisdom, and healing. She was revered as the mother of the Armenian people, a golden figure whose grace ensured bountiful harvests and the safe birth of children. Alongside her came Vahan, a deity of immense power, a god of fire, lightning, and war, celebrated in ancient hymns for his legendary birth from a reed of fire and his epic battles against the dragons of chaos. This pantheon was not distant but intimately involved in the fate of the land and its people. With the world prepared, Aramazed turned to his final and most cherished act. He descended to the new earth, gathered red clay from the soil, and with his own hands carefully molded the forms of the first man and woman. Then, leaning close, he breathed his own divine breath into their still forms, animating them with the spark of life. This act made humanity uniquely sacred, for they carried within them the very essence of the Creator. The land itself, the very clay from which they were formed, was therefore hallowed ground, a divine gift to its first inhabitants. This powerful origin story became the bedrock of Armenian identity, a spiritual anchor through centuries of upheaval. As empires rose and fell around them, and foreign rulers sought to assimilate or destroy their culture, the memory of Aramazed's creation provided an unshakable sense of belonging. It was a story told in secret, preserved in the language, and woven into the intricate knots of their carpets. It affirmed that their connection to the rugged mountains and high plateaus was not merely historical but cosmological. They were not just living on the land, they were literally made from it, a people formed by a god's own hands and sustained by the tears and laughter that had built their world. This myth was a declaration that their culture, like the first humans, was breathed into life by something eternal, and no amount of domination could ever erase that sacred truth. A lone goddess floated in the endless, silent sea for 700 years, a prisoner of the formless deep. This is Ilmatar, the virgin spirit of the air from the Finnish epic, the Kalevala. She grew weary of her solitary existence on the waves, and with a sigh, she lifted her knee above the surface of the water, creating the first solid point in that liquid universe. A celestial duck, searching for a place to nest, saw this raised knee and mistook it for a small, grassy hill. The bird landed and laid 7 eggs, 1 of iron and 6 of gold, settling down to incubate them on the goddess's limb. For 3 days, Ilmatar held perfectly still, but a sudden, intense heat from the developing eggs shot through her body. The pain was so sharp that she jerked her knee, sending the eggs tumbling into the primordial sea. They did not simply sink, they shattered, and from their broken pieces the world was assembled. The lower halves of the shells, heavy and dark, sank to become the solid earth. The luminous upper halves rose to form the vault of the sky. The yolks, bright and golden, transformed into the radiant sun. The whites became the shimmering moon and the brilliant stars that dot the heavens. Nothing was wasted in this cosmic breakage. Every fleck of eggshell found its purpose, but the creation was not yet complete. Ilmatar herself now became the landscape. With her divine hands, she carved out the deep bays and inlets of the Finnish coast. She shaped the rocky foundations of the earth and smoothed the stony reefs beneath the waves. Where she rested her head, she left gentle hills, and where she stretched her feet, she created teeming fishing grounds. After this immense labor, she finally gave birth, not to another god, but to the first man. This was Vainamarainen, an ancient and powerful being who emerged as a wise old sage, already gifted with a profound and magical voice. He became the eternal bard, the master singer whose poems and songs could enchant the forests, calm the waters, and build boats through melody alone. He did not conquer nature with force, but collaborated with it through art and wisdom, bringing the skills of culture, music, and poetry to the world. This entire myth, born from a duck's nest and a goddess's patience, mirrors the Finnish soul's connection to its environment. The world is not built from the corpse of a slain monster, but from the fragile, life-giving fragments of an egg, a symbol of delicate potential. Ilmater's transformation into the land itself explains the deep, spiritual resonance of every lake and forest. The landscape is not just a place to live, it is the literal body of a divine mother to be respected and cherished. And Väinämöinen's power, rooted not in weapons but in song, reveals a cultural truth that wisdom, art, and a harmonious relationship with the natural world are the most potent forces of all. High on the Tibetan plateau, the wind itself is a primal, shaping force. It whispers a creation story where the cosmos began not with a god, but with a great stirring of air. This ancient Bon tradition tells of a primordial wind that gathered a cloud which wept a great rain, pooling into a vast, calm ocean. Upon the surface of these waters, a froth began to form, churned by the elemental energies, and from this froth there coalesced a radiant, golden world egg. The egg incubated, cradled by the elements until the shell cracked open. From it emerged Yumchen Mo, the cosmic man, a being whose very substance was the universe awaiting form. His voice did not merely create sound, it became the rolling thunder that echoes through the mountain valleys. His breath was not just air, it became the constant wind that sculpts the high passes. His two eyes separated, one ascending to become the brilliant, life-giving sun, the other the gentle, watchful moon. Every part of his body completed the world, his flesh becoming the fertile soil and his bones the enduring rock of the Himalayas. This is a vision of a self-creating universe where the human form is a microcosm of the entire cosmic order. Yet another profound Tibetan origin story offers a different kind of genesis, one that explains the dual nature of humanity itself. It is said that the compassionate Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, moved by the emptiness of the new world, took the form of a monkey and went to meditate in a sacred cave. There, a rock ogress, a manifestation of raw, untamed nature, found him. She desired him as her mate, and her pursuit was so relentless that the monkey Bodhisattva, in his infinite compassion, agreed to unite with her. This sacred union produced 6 offspring, the first ancestors of the Tibetan people. From their father, the monkey, they inherited a capacity for compassion, wisdom, and the yearning for enlightenment. From their mother, the ogress, they inherited strength, resilience, and a deep, instinctual connection to the wild earth. This myth does not present a conflict between spirit and nature, but a necessary marriage. It tells us that to be fully human is to hold this tension within ourselves, to balance the serene mind of the meditator with the fierce heart of the mountain dweller. How do these stories of cosmic men and hybrid ancestors connect to the profound philosophies of Tibetan Buddhism? They are beautiful, narrative expressions of the core doctrines of emptiness and interdependence. The cosmic man's body becoming the world illustrates Shunyata, the concept that all phenomena are empty of a separate, independent self. The mountain is not a mountain, it is the bone of Yumchen Mo, the rain is his blood and the thunder is his voice. Nothing exists in isolation. Similarly, the monkey and the ogress are a perfect metaphor for Pratityasamutpada, the interconnected web of all causes and conditions. Our very existence is the result of an inseparable blend of compassion and raw nature, of culture and wilderness, of the divine and the earthly. We are not merely in the universe, we are the universe, woven from the same elemental threads as the wind and the stone. Another world once existed, high in the sky, a place of light and peace. There, a pregnant woman known as Sky Woman lived a contented life until a powerful dream foretold that she would uproot the great celestial tree. Her husband, fearing the dream, tried to prevent it, but Sky Woman's curiosity drew her to the tree. She dug around its roots, and as she worked, the tree gave way, tumbling through a hole it left in the floor of the sky. Sky Woman fell after it, plunging downward through an endless blue void toward the vast, watery world below. The water birds saw her falling and, moved by compassion, flew up to catch her. A great turtle rose from the depths, and the birds gently placed Sky Woman upon its broad, sturdy shell. She was safe, but she needed earth to live. The animals understood this and took turns diving deep into the primal ocean to fetch some soil. One after another failed, until finally the muskrat, small and determined, gave its last breath to bring up a tiny pawful of mud. This sacred earth was placed on the turtle's back, and as Sky Woman walked upon it, she began to dance, her steps causing the land to expand in all directions until it formed a great island, our world, Turtle Island. Sky Woman gave birth to a daughter who grew strong and beautiful on this new land. When the daughter came of age, she was visited by a mysterious spirit of the west wind and became pregnant with twin boys. These brothers were opposites from the very beginning, one good-natured and the other resentful and violent. In a final act of conflict, the mother died giving birth to them. From her body, the good twin, Sapling, created all that is beneficial and beautiful: the sun, the rivers that flow both ways, and the nourishing plants. His brother, Flint, shaped everything that is harsh and dangerous: the jagged mountains, the biting winter winds, and the thorns on the roses. Their eternal struggle is the very reason our world holds both beauty and hardship, a landscape of constant balance between creation and challenge. From this duality, the first human communities gradually emerged, learning through trial and error how to live. They faced periods of great warfare and suffering until a peacemaker appeared, a prophet sent by the Creator. He brought the great law of peace, a constitution of balance and consensus that united the 5 warring Iroquois nations into a powerful confederacy. This law was not a command from above, but a set of principles for living in harmony, where leaders were chosen by clan mothers and decisions required the agreement of all. The story of Sky Woman is therefore more than a creation myth. It is the living memory of a political and spiritual revolution. It teaches that our world was built on cooperation, from the water animals who saved a falling woman to the turtle who offered its back. It insists that human society must mirror this natural balance, resolving conflict through reason and respecting all life as part of a single sacred whole. Even a trickster can be a creator. In the vast, sun-scorched expanse of the Kalahari, the Sand People tell of a world shaped not by an all-powerful, solemn god, but by a mischievous, unpredictable deity named Kagan, the Mantis. He is a being of contradictions, both clever and foolish, whose chaotic adventures and accidental discoveries brought our world into being. In one of the most foundational tales, Kagan was searching for a comfortable place to rest when he took an old, worn-out leather shoe. He did not sculpt a grand form from clay or summon a being from light. He simply took this humble, discarded object and fashioned it into the very first human. He then used his potent magical power, his to breathe life into the shoe, transforming leather into living flesh and spirit. This origin is profoundly different from any we have encountered. It suggests that humanity was born not from a divine plan, but from a moment of casual, almost whimsical ingenuity. Kagan's entire existence was a series of exploits that defined the nature of the world. He would get into petty arguments with other animals, play elaborate pranks that backfired, and stumble into situations that had unintended but permanent consequences. Many of these stories are etiological, meaning they explain why things are the way they are. One tale describes how Kagan's own daughter married the Kwamang-a, a mythical being associated with water, and from this union came the sacred eland. This was not just any animal, it was the first and most important creature, a being of immense spiritual power. the eland became the centerpiece of San's spiritual life, its fat and blood considered potent conduits for accessing the divine. You can see its majestic, humped form painted in ochre on cave walls across southern Africa, a testament to its enduring sacredness. Yet the eland was also a source of profound conflict. Another story tells of how Kagan's own sons hunted and killed the first eland. Kagan was heartbroken and enraged by this act, but from this tragedy, a new order was established. He taught his sons the proper rituals to perform after the hunt, showing them how to show respect to the animal's spirit and use every part of its body. In this way, the very first act of hunting, born from a son's transgression against his father's favorite creation, became the foundation of San's survival and their sacred relationship with the animals they depended upon. Humanity's most crucial tools also came from Kagan's trickery. The myth explains that fire was originally jealously guarded by a giant who kept it for himself. Kagan, seeking to steal this gift for his creations, tied a long, thin thread to the leg of a praying mantis insect, one of his own forms. He then had the mantis fly to the giant, who snatched it up and tossed it into a bag where he kept his fire-making sticks. Once inside, the mantis used the thread to tie the fire sticks together, and Kagan, pulling on the line, yanked them free and delivered fire to humanity. This was not a noble gift from a benevolent god, it was a clever heist. Similarly, the skills of hunting were acquired through observation and mimicry of the mantis itself, whose patient, precise movements became the model for the hunter's stealth and accuracy. Every aspect of the San world, from the behavior of a specific bird to the location of a water source, could be traced back to an event in the mantis's long and winding story. This entire mythic framework is a direct reflection of the San people's deep, intimate knowledge of their harsh desert environment. Their survival in the Kalahari depended on an encyclopedic understanding of every plant, insect, and animal track. The stories of Kagan encode this practical wisdom, transforming the landscape into a living storybook where every creature has a history and a lesson to teach. The world is not a perfect creation, but a work in progress, shaped by a flawed, relatable deity whose mistakes and clever solutions mirror the very real challenges of human life in a demanding land. A king was the first human to walk the earth. In the grand epic of the Shahnameh, written by the poet Ferdowsi, the supreme deity Ahura Mazda did not create a simple man of clay. He created Kiyumaz, a being who was both the first mortal and the first sovereign, his very body radiating a divine aura of Fa, the celestial glory that marks a truly legitimate ruler. Kiyumaz and his people lived in a pristine, mountain-dwelling society, clothed in leopard skins and in perfect harmony with the natural world. His reign established an unbreakable link between kingship and divinity for the Persian Empire, a concept that would justify royal power for centuries. But civilization itself began with his grandson, the insightful Husheng. While traveling through the stony mountains, Husheng threw a rock at a fearsome serpent, but he missed. The stone struck another rock instead, sending a shower of sparks into the dry grass, which burst into flame. This was no accident, but a divine revelation. Husheng did not fear the fire. He bowed to it in gratitude, recognizing it as a tool gifted by the Creator. He then taught his people how to use this sacred element to smelt iron, to cook food, and to protect themselves from the cold and from wild beasts. This moment of discovery launched humanity's journey from a simple existence into a complex civilization. The kings who followed continued this sacred work, each one a culture hero who fought back the forces of chaos. They battled the Divs, the destructive demons of darkness, and in doing so, they taught people how to irrigate fields, how to mine precious metals, and how to build the first cities. This golden age of righteous rule, however, was shattered by a terrifying corruption. A handsome young prince named Zohak was tricked and possessed by the devil Ahriman, who kissed the prince's shoulders. From those cursed spots, two black snakes grew, monstrous entities that could not be removed. The only thing that would soothe their constant, agonizing hunger was a daily meal of human brains. Zohak, now a monstrous tyrant, seized the throne and plunged the world into a long, dark age of terror, each sunrise demanding the sacrifice of 2 more young men to feed the serpents on his shoulders. The land groaned under this oppression until a humble blacksmith named Kave could take no more. The tyrant's officials had taken his last son for execution. Clad in his leather apron, Kave took the spike he used to hold metal in his forge and raised it like a banner. He marched to the palace, and a crowd of the grieving and the angry fell in behind him, rallying to this symbol of righteous rebellion. This was the Darafsh Kaviani, the flag of Kave, which became the enduring emblem of Persian resistance. With the people united behind him, Kave sought out a royal descendant of the ancient kings, the noble youth Feridun. Together, they led the uprising. The heroic Feridun fashioned a unique weapon, a mace shaped like the head of a bull, to symbolize the strength of the righteous. He confronted the serpent-shouldered king in his own fortress and did not kill him, but struck him with the mace and bound him in chains, imprisoning him deep inside a remote mountain where he remains to this day. This epic cycle of creation, civilization, tyranny, and liberation became the soul of Persian identity. It was not merely a story but a political and spiritual blueprint. It taught that a ruler's right to govern came not from mere power, but from the possession of Fa, that divine glory which shone only on those who were just, courageous, and devoted to the well-being of their people. A king without Fa was a monster like Zohak, a curse upon the land, but a ruler who upheld justice like Feridun was the embodiment of the very first man, a mortal touched by heaven, whose duty was to protect the sacred fire of civilization itself. A heavenly prince once gazed down from the sky and saw the potential for a great civilization on earth. The son of the supreme god Hwanin, the prince Hwanung, felt a deep compassion for the human world below. He pleaded with his father to let him descend and bring order, wisdom, and medicine to the people. Moved by his son's earnest desire, Hwanun granted his wish. Hwanung then came down from the heavens with 3,000 loyal followers, descending upon the sacred peak of Mount Tibik. There, beneath a sandalwood tree, he established the divine city, a place he called Cinci. From this holy center, he began his sacred work, governing the human world with 360 laws that covered everything from agriculture and medicine to morality and justice. He taught humanity how to heal sickness, how to build proper homes, and the principles of right and wrong, transforming a wild land into a place of divine order. While Hwanung governed, a tiger and a bear living in the region shared a single, profound wish. They both longed to become human. They came to the divine prince and prayed fervently to him, begging for this transformation. Hwanung, seeing their sincerity, gave them a challenge. He gave them 20 cloves of garlic and a bundle of sacred mugwort. He told them they must retreat into a dark cave for 100 days, eating only this sacred food and avoiding all sunlight. Only then would their wish be granted. The tiger and the bear entered the cave full of hope, but the trial was immense. The darkness was absolute, the diet was monotonous, and the confinement was maddening. The tiger, with its fierce and impatient nature, could not endure. It lasted only a short while before it gave up, roaring in frustration as it burst out of the cave and back into the wilderness. The bear, however, possessed a different kind of strength. It was patient, persistent, and devout. It endured the endless darkness, sustained only by the garlic and mugwort and its unwavering faith in Hwanung's promise. After 100 long days, the bear's perseverance was rewarded. Its body was transformed, and it emerged from the cave as a beautiful woman, Unnayo. She was filled with gratitude and joy, but she soon felt a new longing, a deep loneliness in her human form. She went beneath the sandalwood tree and prayed once more, this time for a child. Hwanung, moved by her devotion and her successful ordeal, took her as his wife. Their union produced a son, the legendary Dangun Wangyom. Dangun was more than a mere mortal. He was the living embodiment of the divine, the animal, and the human worlds. He grew to become a wise and powerful leader. In the year 2333 before the Common Era, he founded the kingdom of Joseon, often translated as Ancient Joseon, on the very peninsula where his father had descended. This was the dawn of Korean civilization, a kingdom that would define a people for millennia. This foundation myth is a powerful tapestry woven from ancient beliefs. The bear as a sacred ancestor points to a deep history of totemism where a clan identifies with an animal spirit. The entire narrative, from Hwanung's descent to Unnyeo's transformation, is steeped in the practices of Korean shamanism, where intermediaries bridge the gap between heaven and earth. And by linking the first king directly to a celestial father and a sacred animal mother, the myth forged an unbreakable ideology of kingship and ethnic identity. It answered the fundamental question of who the Korean people are. They are the children of a god, a bear, and a king, a unique people born from a sacred covenant between heaven and the earth. Yet even the most carefully made worlds were deemed unworthy, washed clean by a divine rage that echoes across continents. The Great Flood is perhaps the most universal of all ancient myths, a story of catastrophic renewal told from the deserts of Mesopotamia to the mountains of China. In the Hebrew Bible, God saw that humanity's wickedness had corrupted the earth and decided to send a deluge, sparing only the righteous Noah, his family, and a remnant of every animal in a massive, pitch-covered ark. This narrative finds a startlingly similar precursor in the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh, where the god Enlil, unable to sleep due to the noise of humankind, sends a flood to wipe them out. The wise god warns the virtuous man Utnapishtim, instructing him to build a great boat to save his family and the seed of all living things. After the flood subsides, Utnapishtim sends out a dove, a swallow, and a raven, just as Noah would later do to find dry land. Far to the east, in Hindu tradition, a fish warns the sage Manu of an impending flood, guiding his ship to safety as the waters rise, allowing him to become the progenitor of a new human race. In China, the goddess Nuwa is said to have melted stones of 5 colors to patch the broken sky and stop a catastrophic flood that threatened to destroy the world, saving humanity from a disaster it did not cause. The Incans told of a time when the sun vanished and a great flood covered the earth, leaving only a man and a woman who survived by floating in a box, eventually washing ashore to repopulate the world. And in Aboriginal Australia, flood stories often serve as moral lessons where the creator being, the rainbow serpent, sends rising waters to punish those who break sacred laws or disrupt the natural order. These stories share a powerful, recurring pattern. Humanity, through its noise, corruption, or disobedience, provokes the gods. A divine decision is made to erase this flawed creation with water. Yet a single thread of hope is preserved. One righteous individual or family, warned by a compassionate deity, survives the cataclysm to begin the human story anew. Why does this particular narrative appear with such consistency across cultures separated by vast oceans and millennia? It speaks to a profound, shared anxiety about our own nature and our place in the cosmos. The flood is the ultimate reset button, a terrifying expression of divine disappointment and a desperate hope for a second chance. It confronts us with the fear that our societies can become so morally corrupt that they warrant total annihilation, while simultaneously offering the comforting promise that virtue, even in a single person, can save the world. These waters are not just punishment, they are purification. They wash away the mistakes of the old world, allowing a new, more hopeful humanity to emerge from the mud, carrying with it the memory of its own fragility and the heavy responsibility to do better this time. 30 different beginnings, yet a single, fundamental question lies at the heart of each one. From the clay of Sumer to the maze of the Maya, from the cosmic egg of China to the tears of Egypt, every culture has looked up at the same stars and asked, why are we here? These ancient narratives are far more than primitive attempts at science. They are the bedrock of entire civilizations. They provided the divine mandate for kings, established the sacred duties of priests and farmers, and wove a web of meaning that connected every individual to the cosmos. They explained the haunting presence of suffering in a world made by gods, and they offered hope that our lives are part of a grand, intentional design. The story of a world built from a slain giant justified a social order where every person had a place. The tale of a trickster stealing fire celebrated the human intellect that defies the divine. Each myth is a key to understanding the society that cherished it, a reflection of their deepest fears about chaos and their most profound hopes for order and purpose. So, which of these origins speaks to you? Does the quiet perseverance of the bear in the Korean myth capture your imagination? Or perhaps the cosmic sacrifice of the Aztec fifth son? Or the gentle dance of Sky Woman on